Hey, this is Notser, and this is a look at the early tiers of the Soviet destroyer line. At Tier 2, we have the Storozhevoi. It is from the Imperial Russian Navy. You can see by the blue cross and the white background. What can I say? It's got 302mm guns with a fair range, really short-range torpedoes, no armor whatsoever. Every HE and AP can do damage to this. There's not going to be any question. Overall, it's got somewhat slow turret traverse, but it doesn't really matter because this is Tier 2. And here's going to be an example of why Tier 2 is not a big deal. Usually, these are new players to the game, new players to their classes. They're not 100% in control of their surroundings, so you can take advantage of using islands to line of sight and then ambush them hard with your torpedoes. Yeah, you have probably about a kilometer, and if you can obviously get a really cheesy commander, you can get that even lower, but about a kilometer of vision that you have to deal with while trying to get in torpedo range. But because it's such a low tier, it's not a big deal. There are plenty of islands and plenty of players that just miss their shots. So I'm coming in here trying to do a torpedo attack. Clearly the French wants to attack me, but he can't do anything, and we just drop it right on him. Take out this guy, at least I think we do. Please? Yeah. You basically need all your torpedoes in order to do enough damage. At Tier 3, we have the Derzki. It is, again, an Imperial Russian Navy vessel. It has basically the exact same setup, only slightly different on torpedo systems. It's 5x2 instead of 3x3. So you gain one extra torpedo. You still need a lot of torpedoes to take out the target. It still has low range, no armor, of course. Concealment is going up slightly, so you have to deal with that. Same sort of strategy. Your guns are okay, but because players, and we actually penetrated that. Poor Frenchie, right? You feel bad for the French. Even though the guns are okay, players just make more mistakes down here than at high tier. They will allow you to get within torpedo range and launch it, and having 5 sets of 2 is very intimidating to anyone. I don't care what tier you are. But for me, personally, whenever I queue into these things, it's down the line and everyone knows it. So I usually get in with 3, 4, or 5 people who are watching my stream, and they will not allow me to just play as crazy aggressive as I would usually play at Tier 3, let's face it. Nobody down here is going to stop you, but, you know, it's fun to maximize your commander, get good concealment, get close, and have fast torpedo run. If the player decides to continue pushing forward into your smoke, well, guess what? He's getting a wall of torpedoes ×2, because by the time your torpedoes hit the target, or get to the target, you'll have another set ready to go. Turret traverse is still an issue, but because of the tier, you honestly don't use your guns as much as your torpedoes. Now, that's not going to be the case for the future, but for now, sure. At Tier 4, we have the Izyaslav. This is the first Soviet vessel, and it's not quite the normal Soviet flag that we're used to for the Navy. It's got 502mm guns. We're starting to work towards exactly what we expect from a Soviet destroyer. This is still early enough that enemies are going to make the same mistake and get too close to you. 3x3 is a pretty good setup. At 5 kilometers, you get 1 extra kilometer, and the speed's fair. Could the range of the torpedoes be better? Of course, but that's not the point of these ships. These guys are going to engage at near max range, try and light the target up, punish anyone who shows too much side with AP. If you get into a scenario where you're absolutely right on top of a target, you can use your torpedoes to great effect. But as players increase in their skill level, you're going to find less and less success in that particular style. But the gun system's always going to hold up. It holds up all the way to Tier 10. It is devastating, and I don't blame many people for being like, I hate the Soviet destroyers. They're just so annoying. Well, guess what? That's just their style. For me personally, the Izyaslav, if I were to get a 19 skill commander, I would get priority target, last stand, probably demolition expert, maybe survivability expert, basic firing training, advanced firing training. I would consider getting concealment. Maybe picking up a third level 3 skill, but I would absolutely get expert marksman as my 12th point. You know, right after you get advanced firing training, you come back and you get expert marksman because the turrets, they traverse extremely slow, and every second that you're traversing, it's 1 second less damage you can do on the target. At tier 5, we have the Podvoisky. This is a particularly new Soviet destroyer. They recently did a revamp, and they shifted out the Gnevny to tier 6. This is at tier 5. It fits the bill of a Soviet destroyer. 530mm guns, 10.5 kilometer range, 2x3, 4-kilometer range torpedo systems, 42 knots in the water. Wow, that jumps out. That is so high. That is not with a speed flag, by the way. So you could get that even higher. Concealment, pretty garbage, but that's to be expected as you progress down the Soviet destroyer line. This was added in after the fact. It doesn't really follow the same principles as the other ships. It's sort of a jump, skip here and there. It's more on its size than anything is why it's at tier 5. That speed is ridiculous. You're not going to see that kind of speed for 2 or 3 more tiers. But this is really getting you into the style of play that you are going to have to do forever at this point. Tier 6, premiums, 7, 8, 9, 10. The alternative line, go at near max range, get advanced firing training, just keep firing your guns at the enemy. Your torpedo systems are not to be used except for when you're close because of an island blocking line of sight, or it's an ambush where they're trying to push you into your smoke, or you're trying to ambush them around a corner. You're not really going to have success with your torpedoes. Most of your success comes from your guns. That's not a bad thing, because these guns are sick. All the other destroyers are jealous of you, envious of the gun systems you have. But expert marksman is necessary for this ship to really let it shine. But you have to take last stand first, because you're a destroyer. That's just the way it works. Here is the premium tier 5 Gremyashchy. This particular ship was actually not sold except for a preview of closed beta. 430mm guns, great range, great torpedo range, 8 kilometers. You're not going to see that for a while. It was basically universally accepted to be overpowered. Now, when they put in the stealth fire nerfs, it really hurt the ship in a good way. It could stealth fire for about 4 or 5 kilometers. Nobody could see it. But now, it's a little bit more reasonable. When it's firing, everyone can see it. It still has sick torpedoes that outrange its concealment, so you can sort of play a hybrid where you could fire your guns at max range, move in, and still torpedo without being seen. It feels great. Again, the turrets, they traverse extremely slow. It was the trait that made it balanced. Yeah, super balanced. Having the ability to stealth fire for 4 or 5 kilometers, having the chance to use torpedoes, which no other Soviet destroyer could use at the time. Great concealment. I mean, I think it had the same concealment as Japanese or Americans when you consider all the commanders and stuff like that. So it was just completely ridiculous. And it to some extent, it still is. I mean, other than the stealth fire nerf, it still has everything that's great about it. And the weakest part is the turrets. So if you see this out there, be very careful. The torpedoes can actually be used. But 130s, great damage output, great rate of fire. Use HE, use AP. It's the Soviet Destroyers 101. Nothing really special about it, other than it's great. Here is another premium tier 5, one that's actually sold. Okhotnik, or Robotnik, as the community has called, because obviously the name's really close. This has 7 130mm guns, 12 torpedoes. Really bad speed compared to other Soviets. Concealment, fairly okay. The length of the ship, though, is an issue in more ways than one, but its alpha damage is insane. 7 130mm guns. You do pay a price for rate of fire, but oh man, you kill enemies so quickly in such a small window. You know, you can drop off, fire again, drop off, fire again, use your smoke. You're taking off chunks of the enemy's hit points. And this was introduced when they did the revisit. Oh, what was it, like 2 or 3 months ago? Maybe. And I've had a lot of fun with it because of the nature of the 7 guns. Now, it is extremely long, and I think 5 of the guns are facing the rear. So if you have to retreat, make sure you retreat with those 5 guns facing, because you could still use 5 guns, you know, the normal allotment of armament for most Soviet destroyers, but that's just a part of their gun systems. It's a long ship, just be careful of that. But I've had instances where I've used my guns, done a little bit of damage, got into a situation where I could send torpedoes at not 1, but 2 targets and still have leftover torpedoes. It should just be called alpha damage, because that is the essence of the ship. And it's great. It's a great, fun ship. I've enjoyed my time with it. People really do recognize its weaknesses, though. Anti-aircraft, CVs will attack you all the time. They just see it. Oh, look at this guy. He's so long. He can't avoid. And then they'll send torpedoes at you. At Tier 6, and the final one for this video, Gnevny. This used to be Tier 5, moved up to Tier 6. It's still pretty good. 430mm guns. It's got 6 torpedo systems, still 4-kilometer range. You just have to deal with that. 70 knots though in the water, so those torpedoes get up. It's got pretty fair speed, 38's not a slouch. Concealment, pretty good, especially for a Soviet destroyer. You're going to run into a lot of situations where you just don't have any concealment as a Soviet destroyer. That's just something you have to give up. But what you get is extreme range in order to engage targets on your own terms, hit the shots that no other ship can hit. That's just a Soviet trait where they're like lasers to the target. And if you're going 1v1 against an enemy destroyer, they don't want to deal with you at all. They don't want anything to do with you because you're going to do 2,000 per salvo, maybe even higher. It all depends on where you hit your shots. But it's always been fun for me. The Soviet destroyers are just a different beast. When they were introduced, I was like, whoa, what's going on? These are only used torpedoes, but their guns are insane. And they've gone through buffs, nerfs, adjustments. It's always fun to play them. But I will admit that if an aircraft carrier wants to kill you, they can absolutely kill you. Now, should I have taken those 2 torpedoes? No, but I was getting crisscrossed. There was nothing I could do. I was just trying to figure out a way to angle enough to avoid torpedoes and get out of it, but just couldn't. The Gnevny, like all other early Soviet destroyers, last stand, advanced firing training, you want to pick up expert marksman, but the platform's fun. Hope this was useful, hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll catch you next time.